Hello and welcome to the Social Thread podcast, where you can be a part of a community where you can thrive and you can belong and explore your faith on your own terms. I'm Robert Payne.
And I'm Rob Reinders.
And today on our episode, we're going to talk about what we can learn from the experience of other people's faith journey. So, Rob, I thought we'd kind of focus on you. And so why don't you tell our listeners about your faith journey?
My faith journey, I think it feels kind of unremarkable, but there's some moments in my life where my faith definitely changed who I am and who I've become, and just put me like on different trajectories. So I think, as a kid, it feels pretty unremarkable. As I grew up, first few years of my life, we went to the Baptist church, which is where my mom was raised, and that was her faith tradition for most of her life. And then when we moved, when I was like 9 years old, and we moved in with my dad's parents because they were having health problems. And it was the same house my dad grew up in, and was just down the street from the church he grew up in, and which was a United Methodist church in the Bay Area in Livermore, California. And so we started going there just because that's what was convenient and familiar to my family. And I had no idea that, just getting drugged to Sunday morning worship and Sunday school, bored out of my mind as a 9 and 10-year-old, would sort of chart this course on my life forever, really. So, I ended up through the years just getting really involved, and just always thought like, man, church is a pretty cool place. It's where you go and hang out with your friends, even though some of this stuff can seem kind of boring and meaningless, and there's like old guys in a pulpit talking to you all the time. And but it just really over time became this safe place for me to escape, all those pressures and things and emotions of being a teenager. And it was through church that I got, to go on some summer mission trips where we went and helped people and fixed houses and served food, and really got to experience life outside of my own, what was probably a pretty sheltered context at the time. And, just had some experiences that I can't explain. I didn't see visions or hear voices, or, God didn't appear to me in toast or or whatever, like you read about on the news sometimes. But just through conversations with people, through these deep feeling experiences, through seeing the world through other people's eyes, I just really began to feel this calling that, like, oh man, maybe there's something deeper here. Maybe I'm supposed to do something with my life through faith. And it was really through working on Native American reservations, and during my summers in college, running some of those same mission projects that I did when I was a kid, and having these deep cross-cultural experiences, that I just had these really powerful faith experiences, and was like, man, I think I'm called to help people through religion, through church, through faith, help other people understand their faith stories, and serve and be compassionate in this way. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. And we talked about our conceptions of God a couple of weeks ago, and how that evolved over time. And I think that's the same that's just happened with my faith journey. It's become less sort of, I got to check all these boxes of, do I believe the right things? Did I do all the right things? And more, did I am I loving God the best I can? Am I loving my neighbor the best I can? And am I being attentive to my own journey so that I can be attentive to the people I care about and making the world a better place. So I don't know how compelling that was, but that's kind of my story. Yeah. Robert, I know you have a story that we'll dive into it at a later time, but I also know I've been really just really inspired and compelled when you and I have talked offline here about some of the things you've read and some of the other people you've encountered and whatnot, and we've all had those mentors and those guides along the way in our life and in that journey of faith. Who have been some of those influential people or stories for you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, kind of like you, I also grew up in the church and, felt that call or, that urging into vocational ministry as a pastor. And one of the people so I had a certain kind of framework and worldview that when you grow up in and you serve in an evangelical church, your worldview is kind of a specific way. And for me, what really was a turning point for me was an author by the name of Brian McLaren. And he himself was kind of going through a similar journey in reading his books, where he was a pastor, and then he just had this sense of there's something not quite right about what I'm doing and what I'm saying. There's got to be like the shift. And so for me, he was really influential for me to be able to say, oh, okay, there's actually other people out there who were serving in the same capacity, but it was okay to question if this is the way that we've always done it. Why is this the way we've always done it? Why is this the way we've always interpreted things the way we've interpreted? That. And so for me, reading people like Brian McLaren, and it really was incredibly influential, particularly on my what I would call my second half or my second leg of my faith journey here. And so that was really influential.
Yeah, there's something about life can seem really lonely, especially when you think, oh man, I'm the only person who's ever experienced this, or I'm the only person who has these thoughts or these beliefs or these feelings. And then, you run across somebody like a Brian McLaren, and you read their story, and it becomes liberating in a way, right? Because you're like, wow, for the first time, I am not alone. Somebody else. There are other people like me out there. How do I find them?
Yeah, I'm not all by myself. Yes.
Yeah. It puts a big smile on your face, right?
Well, yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Well, and that got me thinking, when I was listening to your story, and I'm reflecting on mine as you were telling it, you and I both grew up in church. And I think my question for you is, I know we have a lot of listeners that grew up in church, but we also have a lot of listeners who did not grow up in church. Yeah. And so I think my question to you is, what can we learn from people's faith journey who did not grow up in the traditional church?
Yeah, I think having an open mind is the key to that, and having different experiences, getting out of our own bubble, and not thinking when we hear about somebody else's experience, whether it's a church experience or not church experience. I think those of us who come from that church perspective tend to compare everything else to our own experience, and sometimes that can be good, but sometimes that could feel a little judgy, right? And of like, oh, how could we get this person caught up to where we are, or whatever. So I think it's really just listening with an open mind, hearing somebody else's story, and with a posture of, what can I learn from this versus what can I teach you? And knowing that our stories are complementary to one another, and that people too who come from outside of our own perspective often see things that we may not see when we're in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and they may be able to offer a good critique of, hey, this may seem life-giving for you, but it either doesn't make sense to me or maybe actually be harmful to me. And those are the moments where we really need to listen closely. But I tend to think about it of, do we listen to learn and we listen to collaborate, and that's, even within the church, our experiences are different from one another. I remember I was I was in my first job. I was at a TCBY yogurt. That was my first job in high school. serving frozen yogurt.
Mm-hmm.
Weighing the yogurt, putting the toppings on. It was great. And there's a
Right.
gal I worked with who was I think I grew up with her. Like, we weren't like best friends or anything, but we certainly knew each other throughout the years and went to the same high school and whatnot. And one night we ended up talking about faith and found out, oh, she went to church too. And I'm like, oh man, isn't it awesome? Like, everybody loves you at church, and you go and you help people and you do really good stuff. And she's like, well, which church do you go to? And I told her it was a Methodist church, and said, oh, you guys are going to hell. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? Church people wouldn't say that to each other. Like,
yeah, that's right.
That's craziness. But in her mind, like, I make fun of her at the time. I was making fun of her at the time, or I was just kind of shocked. And, there's a period in my life where I think I was judgy about that. But I look back on it now and realize, like, that's all she knew. That was her perspective at the time. And now I would just kind of want to, dig deep on that and build that relationship, and be less like you're crazy. and
right,
more like,
right.
Hey, help me understand, like, what's your experience that led you to that? Like, what can you teach me about that, other than I'm going to burn in eternity forever. But there's more to that story. And I think when I hear things like that are so different from my own experience, I now want to just dig deeper and listen more intently about what's happening there. Yeah. I hope that answers
that's good,
your question.
Man. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
So, just, I think, just by, just by listening, that really is a great idea. And I know we'll kind of dive deeper a little bit into spiritual practices on the next podcast, but if you want a quick glimpse of what a good spiritual practice, or how you can move forward and listen and learn from other people and their faith experience, listening really is maybe one of the most difficult spiritual practices you can undertake, because I know for me, I have no I'm quick to defend and quick to argue. That's just my personality. But anyway, I just would just challenge our listeners to continue to get involved with us here at Social Thread, to explore your faith on your own terms. We want to be a part of this journey with you, and really walking alongside your faith journey, so you don't have to be out there by yourself. And we just want to encourage you to, if you've not signed up for the newsletter, you can go to socialthread.org. If you are wanting to get involved and want to support, you can, of course, go to socialthread.org/support and make your tax-deductible contribution there. And anyway, Rob, this is a good podcast. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great conversation. Always a pleasure with you, sir. And we'll see you guys next time.